Hey, everybody, how's it going? Thank you for tuning in once again to This Week in Mormons. I'm Geoff Openshaw.
I'm Joseph Peterson.
I'm Cory Ward.
That's right. And you know what that means when you hear these three fools get together, everybody. Every 6 months, it is time for our special episode wherein we prognosticate, as prognosticators do, about where temples might be. I always enjoy this. I thoroughly enjoy Joe and Cory's contributions in this process. It's Cory's second time around actually being on the pod, and I'm very excited to have him involved.
I'm glad
So
to
we
be
have
here.
a lot of fun, you know? How are you guys doing? What's going on? What's new? What's the scuttlebutt?
Life is good. I was just telling Cory, I appreciate him being a part of this endeavor now because I feel like he adds a little bit more clout than I've ever brought.
Grounded
So
analysis is how I would look at it. Yeah. Like we've tried to do it, but I've enjoyed that quite a bit ever since Cory's been involved too. I think it's great. Cory is, of course, Cory, you're an urban planner. You're a demographer. You're doing all this good stuff. So
I'm a fan of you guys. I've been reading your temple predictions since 2016 is when you started.
oh my gosh, he's an
I
OG.
know.
Way
6
back in
years.
the day.
How a fan becomes the teacher or something like that. So I'm excited this time around. Increasingly, I don't know what to expect, though. I used to, we've said this before. I felt like a couple years ago, the predictions could seem wild and outlandish, but Joe, you and I we had reasons behind them. We had good sense of what would happen and when. We did pretty well. We've still done pretty well. But obviously, especially since April of last year when President Nelson announced 20 temples.
Yeah.
That
was a seminal moment. It feels like the rubric has kind of probably forever changed.
Yeah. At least as long as President Nelson is prophet. I have heard this is purely anecdotal, purely murmurings
you're
from
going there.
Secondhand sources. Who knows, right? But some of this actually came from some allegedly leaked stuff from a stake president who went to a training or something like that. The whole point is, allegedly there are people that were in the temple department who have been concerned that we are legitimately oversaturating with temples right now. These announcements are coming and blindsiding the ones who have been planning, who actually have programs using Python scripts to figure out where temples should go based on the data. And then President Nelson's just like, nah, we're just going to build them in these other places too. And they're like, well, sorry. I could see that happening. I mean, and from conversing with other people who work for the church, I know fully well there's times when they're out of nowhere given the opportunity, invited, as we often say, by general authority to develop some full software suite of something. It's and we need this in 6 months. That's normal, right? And the developers will be like,
Well, there's always that dance between, you when you're leading a massive organization and you hire skilled tradesmen to do a thing that you want to do, but then you also have your own whims as a leadership, and that can kind of be not tension, but that can change the direction of things pretty quickly.
And I don't think there's ever any kind of malevolence behind any of that. I mean, you can be in any organization and there's leaders who want a certain thing and might not always understand what goes into it. But I think the temple department's running well. But I also wouldn't be surprised if, given the nature of Revelation and how things go, maybe they've had their list of we've got some likely locations, President. We presented these to you for thought. And there might be many times when he's just been but also...
I think you mean though, we have some likely locations. It's the real twin. No, what is it?
The website?
This Week in Mormons.
This website? It's just thisweekinmormons.com. That's... How do you not know this?
Joseph? I don't. I was thinking Twitter for a second.
Yeah, I'm always concerned that President Nelson's going to kind of go the way of President Monson, where he's like, yeah, we're going to take some time to catch up on some announcements. So every conference I'm hesitant to be maybe this is the conference where there's not any.
I've wondered that too, but I feel like under President Monson, we weren't at this cadence that we got used to under President Monson, right? It was not common under President Hinckley even to have temples announced every single conference. This was not a thing. And temples always haven't been announced during General Conference either. Sometimes they've come in all sorts of ways.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong too, though, but I think that maybe it's a different motive behind, I think, President Nelson, where his temple announcements often seem to be almost declarations of faith or proclamations of faith, and not necessarily need to be as all buttoned up maybe than past presidents typically waited for until they announced it. So I don't know. I mean, we got Russia China, things like that, where it's like, well, there's still some T's to cross and some I's to dot, and we're not exactly sure either where it's going to go or, what all of the logistics are, but we're just going to put it out there that this is our intention and we'll make it happen when it happens, kind of a thing. And so that's kind of like the vibe that I'm getting.
Well, and like temple building and temple attendance are clearly major hallmarks in general of President Nelson. It was one of the first things he said in his first remarks when he became the prophet in January of 2018. That was the main thing he focused on, be in the temple and talk about the temple. So I don't think it's surprising that this has been a sort of a bullish 4 years of temple announcing. And yeah, there's a lot to build. There's a massive backlog. But given that distinction, I feel like President Monson was doing fewer every conference for one. And then even he said like, all right, let's get caught up a little bit. But President Nelson's like, nope, I'm going to announce 20 of them. A lot of them might be built modularly, as Cory's reported on, right? Which can expedite, because I think Helena is probably going to be done this year. They're already tracking for it to be done very quickly. Yeah. So I don't expect it to be quiet. I think it's just going to keep going until the Lord says President Nelson is finished and has done his good work.
I always look at the ratio of the ones under construction and the ones announced. So like right now it's 46 under construction, 49 announced. But they have like another 7 groundbreakings that they're going to do in the next few months. So that under construction number is going to surpass the announced number. So that gives more room for more announcements. So
well, there you have it.
But then if you announce like 15 more...
But as long as you can keep up. Here's
the question though. Are we at a place where it's like 2 steps forward, but then you're getting eclipsed by 3 other steps consistently? Like it used to be a lot more under construction and fewer announced, and hasn't that ratio slowly tilted towards something close to equilibrium, but now we run the risk of announced eclipsing under construction permanently? Because you're right. I mean, how many can we build at a given time? We're not building 20 at any given time. I mean, I know right now you said we're building
46, although many of
46, but are we keeping a clip going where we're building 15 to 20 and breaking ground every 6 months to keep pace with what's being announced?
True. Yeah.
In the end, it's how many are dedicated a year, right? What's that?
That's
average?
Me deflating Cory right there.
But yeah, COVID's been a huge hit to that. There's only 2 last year that were dedicated. This year, hopefully, I mean, there's 3 scheduled so far. Hopefully, there's another 6 more. So
yeah, what else do we have right now for dedication? So we got Rio's open houses underway.
We got Geo
DC,
Guam,
right?
Yeah, you got Guam. Are we counting? We got Praia and
just
Cape Verde.
Yesterday, DC. The rededication for the Tokyo Temple was announced.
Mm-hmm.
So you got that.
Things are coming together.
Other temples that are like almost done: Quito, Ecuador, Belém, Brazil, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and then Helena. That might be the next. So
Helena's. How many other ones have been modular? This was interesting, Cory, because you broke a lot of the news about this. I would say nobody was talking modular temples until you dug into the type of firms they'd contracted with, permit types, all this stuff, and realize, and based on some words like, yeah, they're planning on trying to build a temple in like a year using prefabricated modular components, which they haven't done before. I mean, I know Helena is kind of the pilot for it, but where else are they actually planning on doing
right now? Casper's under construction. If you look at the construction photographs, you can see that they're ready to put in the modules. So I expect in the next couple of weeks, next few weeks, there'll be modules get up there.
Yeah,
Elko will start next, so that will be also the same design. And then there's a number in the Pacific, like Port Moresby, Tarawa, Port Vila. I think those will also be.
Are those following that template? Okay.
I believe so. And so those might be a little more challenged transporting those modules there. But
and I guess I'm talking about that like wonkiness that has entered the chat.
No, I love it. And the modular ones, I think they're all primarily about 10,000 square feet, right? I think Helena's around that, and that seems to be the norm. So even though you might see some renderings, like I'm looking at Casper, Wyoming, it looks stately and fine. And it's from the same perspective as, the elevation is similar to what a lot of them would appear to be.
So like a small house in Bountiful or Draper.
That's right.
The next move for temples, by the way, is the church is just going to exercise eminent domain on people's properties in Highland and Alpine and just say, sorry, man. Immigration Canyon is now ours. This is what's happening.
Boy.
Anyway, so to get to the predictions, everybody. So for many years, and we're still kind of doing this, I don't say it's the only thing we lean on anymore. We do look at some metrics, and a lot of that involves, is there church membership? It used to be like, is there like 12 or 15 stakes to support a temple there? That's out the window. It could be whatever. that could
20 or
dictate
30.
that could dictate the size of a temple for sure. But the thing we've always looked at, though, is 200-mile radius from a temple because of something President Monson said many years ago now. But back then he said 85% of church membership was within 200 miles of a temple. I imagine that percentage has increased in the years since. But so that's one indicator we use. And we still use our map that you can see with this episode over at thisweekinmormons.com. It's a nice visual. It doesn't tell the whole story, of course, but we have a map that with circles radiating 200 miles around from where temple locations are. And you can kind of see where the holes are, so to speak. But President Nelson, understanding nicely that 200 miles isn't everything, because 200 miles in an area with well-developed roads and easy infrastructure can be a lot easier than 200 miles in a developing country or somewhere that doesn't have good public transit or any number of things, right? And so he's also spoken about how he wants every member of the church within 2 hours of a temple. And 2 hours can be a very different thing, depending on which part of the world you live in. And of course, that's not perfect either, because like obviously you're still building temples in Utah. And it's not like Orem and Linden are 2 hours apart, right? I mean, we get it. There are exceptions. So we're trying to kind of lean on both of these ideas in framing where they could go, while also understanding sometimes temples are going in areas just because there are so many members, no matter the geographic metrics like that. Or sometimes it is because they are so isolated, despite having so few members, that it's a nice way to bring the temple to them. I mean, Guam's a great example. There's like Aztec in Guam itself.
Right.
But they have to travel to, I don't even know which temple they were assigned to, Fiji before that,
Manila,
probably,
I think.
or Manila or something like that. Yeah, nothing easy.
Well, and there's a whole host too of like how popular a temple is, right? Or usage that other metrics that we don't necessarily have access to that would clearly go into those decision factors.
Yeah. So we put an example here that you can see with the article about it. So just for example, say we were calling for a temple in Knoxville, which, spoiler alert, it's only an honorable mention this time around. It's not actually one of our picks. But say there was one in Knoxville, Tennessee, over there on the slopes of the Smoky Mountains, right? Technically speaking, it's just under 200 miles from the Nashville, Tennessee temple, which is down in Franklin, Tennessee. But it's definitely more than 2 hours to get down there because of where it is and because of geography. And if you look at a map and look at the other closest temples, Atlanta, Columbia, South Carolina, Louisville, any of those, it's definitely more than 2 hours away. So that's why we could make cases and say, okay, it might be geographically closer to some of these temples and overlap with different districts, but real driving time, and unfortunately for most, in the US at least, it's driving. Like there's not a lot of instances where people are hopping on the train to go to the temple, at least here in the States. That's a real factor to consider, and that'll come into play in some other spots. So fully understanding, though, we are not prophets or apostles or anything like that. We have no revelation on this matter. This is just us looking at what kind of makes sense and then offering our opinions on it. There are always surprises in that regard. I was shocked a year ago when Yorba Linda was announced as a temple because that area of the church is losing members, but great, cool to have my homeland get a temple. So we never know what's going to happen. The other bit of housekeeping before we get into it, typically we've had kind of like we've done rotated picks each and then we comment on them. I think it'll still kind of sound like that audio wise, but officially our first 6 picks are just joint picks that we all agreed upon, like in discussing this. None of us said like, I'm just going to throw one out there and let you guys pick me apart about it. We jointly wrote our synopses for the first 6 temples. We'll probably just take turns talking about them though. There's at least a lead off on the discussion. And then we can lead into the ones that are a little bit more wild card, more out there, perhaps less likely. So I think I've covered it all, right? Enough groundwork, enough housekeeping.
Sounds good.
Let's
okay.
do it.
Cory, you have voluntold to take us through the first one. What do we got?
Okay. If you recall, last time I was on this podcast, I made a good case, I think, for Peru, how it's under templed. It's one of those countries one of only 5 countries that has more than 100 stakes. And so you'd think that also means a lot of temples. But there's actually a couple other countries that have more temples, like Canada, Australia, Argentina. They don't have as many stakes, but they have more temples. And so I don't know if that reflects anything about the grouping of the stakes or the development or the size of the stakes. But anyways, I think Peru is deserving of more temples. President Nelson has never announced a temple there, and the current temple, the second one in Lima, is under construction soon, probably to be completed this year or next year. So I definitely say Peru's ready for some new temples. But this year I'm making the case for Iquitos. So if you don't know where Iquitos is, it is most of Peru is a desert. Most of the populated areas are pretty dry areas, but Iquitos is located in the Amazon rainforest, right on the banks of the Amazon River.
So the rest of the country is like a rain shadow, basically.
That's right.
Yeah, because of the Andes Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
And so to get Iquitos is effectively an island because there's no roads to get to the rest of Peru from Iquitos. So you either have to ride on a boat ride to a town down the river and then drive to Lima, or you have to take a plane. And so either of those aren't ideal for other people living in Iquitos. So and it would be one thing if there's just a few members there, but there's 3 stakes there, like I think 15 wards. And so this is definitely one of those areas where I think the remoteness and the relative quantity of members really would qualify for a temple.
What temple district is it in? I'm not seeing.
I think it's
in Lima.
Oh, Lima.
Right?
I'm gonna look it up.
It is extremely removed from a lot of the rest of Peru. I mean, Amazonian Peru is just a whole different world, frankly. And so,
well, that really draws into question the whole 2-hour element.
Well, it really is, because it's like I think this might be one of the most extreme examples in this entire episode of a temple you've called for that is far outside of it's outside of 200 miles for sure, and it's way outside of 2 hours from anywhere close. I mean, either they fly to Lima, or you sail up the Amazon and go through customs and go to Manaus in Brazil, but I don't think that's farther away geographically than Lima even if it doesn't involve air or land or road travel. They are isolated. And there are 3 stakes, so it's a good point.
And then a couple of years ago, there was a temple announced in Coban, Guatemala, and it's pretty isolated, just like Iquitos, but not that isolated. And in Coban, there's only 1 stake, and so, I think just the quantity of members is there to justify a remote area temple.
Yeah, like really to look at it like basically an island, and other island nations that have that number, that critical mass of membership, typically get a temple. So
it's a good way to look at it, actually, as if it was just an isolated island. I mean, if this is like Cabo Verde, right? Cape Verde has, I think, actually more stakes than that, but still,
or Praia, or
or similarly, yeah. Treat them that way. Treat them treat them that way, like isolated saints, people without a country.
That's a cool pick. I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Boy, it really is far from that temple too.
Joe's just it's losing it on the map right now.
That's crazy. Holy cow!
All right. So we've got Peru.
Oh, so let's stay in Latin America, but go up a little bit to El Salvador. I have to admit, this one wasn't really on my radar until every year, kind of a couple months before we do this podcast, I'll just kind of marinate in the maps a little bit, and this one kind of stuck out to me as sort of like how come I haven't seen this before? But so small country, El Salvador, about the size of Massachusetts. They have like one pretty major city, San Salvador, the capital. That's where the temple is, and it's a tidy little temple with like 22 stakes, in the country, and so it's just kind of, it's a small country. It's got one temple. It's always sort of been its thing, but I feel
it's not that old either, right? Isn't the temple there only like 10 years old, maybe?
So 2011. Yeah. So I guess it's been a little bit of a minute. It's similar to, I think, what we see a lot of temples in Central and South America. It's in the 20,000 square foot territory. I think the one in Santiago was only that size as well in Chile. And so, it's not one of the small temples, but it's definitely not like one of the 80,000 square foot Utah temples either. So definitely a low end on the medium scale. And what else do I want to say about it? Like I said, 22 stakes. But, in this era, 22 stakes, that feels like it's a lot for any temple district. So looking at like the scatter shot of where those stakes are, it seems to be a pretty natural separation where 10 of them that are kind of in the western side of the country, that kind of hover around the city of Santa Ana, which itself is, kind of its own hub. It's a little bit of touristy, a lot of great history there. And so
that's why you build a temple if it's touristy and cool, which is
which
is why there's a temple in Disney World.
Because roads, sometimes you have to think about like, in smaller countries, all roads kind of lead to the capital, but this is a place where, roads lead there, people go there. It's its own hub, that kind of a thing. It's a big coffee commerce center too. And so I like to look at that sort of like tertiary data. I think Port Moresby was the one that made me think about that stuff, because I think you brought that up, Geoff, of just like what's the transportation infrastructure for most of the people in the country. Is it just easier to go to like the main city or to the port city, even if a temple somewhere else would be like maybe closer to another cluster of stakes or whatever the case may be? So I think in this case, the infrastructure is there. Santa Ana has the membership, I think it's a good guess. I think it's surprised me, like I said, but I think it's sort of an obvious one. So I would kind of be surprised probably if it didn't get announced this go around.
I agree.
Yeah, the neighboring country, Honduras, it just got a second temple just a few years ago. That first temple was built about the same time as the San Salvador temple, and so about the same size. So I would say it's about due time for El Salvador to get its second as well.
Makes sense. Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of Central America starting to get second temple. And Guatemala has kind of been out doing its own thing, but
it's 4 now.
Yeah, which is crazy. But I do think the other countries are starting to catch up. But poor Belize. Come on, Belize. What is it? Just because you're an Anglophone country, you don't get any love? Come on, Belize.
What were you saying? Cory, what were you saying about
visited. That? Come on.
That's crazy.
Come on. All right. Moving up to, the promised land, North America. The United States. Here's one we've talked about before, but I think we all agree it seems extremely likely, even if not every indicator goes there. Let's look at Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, the main caveat here is Charlotte is not more than 200 miles away from the temple in Columbia, South Carolina. It's like a 90-ish minute drive, but I'd say it's like almost 200 miles. It kind of depends on where you are, but if you look at like the 2-hour drive thing, definitely. Let me back up. It's definitely not 200 miles. As far as the time it takes to get there, it could be between 90 minutes to 2 hours, kind of depending on where you are in the Charlotte metro. I would say based on some of the software we're using that estimates how far you can drive from a certain point within 2 hours, that radius kind of laps up on the southern environs of Charlotte, right? But it is accounted for. But Charlotte's still it's one of the fastest growing metro areas in the country. It's far, far bigger than Columbia, South Carolina. It's a bigger metro area even than the Research Triangle, as they call it, over in the other part of North Carolina, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. Raleigh has a temple, another Hinckley era mini one, just like in South Carolina. So it's not that they can't get to a temple. And I'd say in a worst case situation, if you live in Charlotte, you can get to a temple within 3 hours tops or so, because you could drive to Raleigh if you need to. If for some reason South Carolina is closed, or that's what they could say. They wouldn't go to when Raleigh was closed for a while because they rebuilt the whole thing.
But that's a big city to have that far away from either temple.
Yeah, and it's not like we only build temples if they're like, oh, it's a big city, so it gets a temple. Like there's a reason all those years ago they built that one temple in South Carolina and not in Charlotte, for example. I have to imagine when the brethren were weighing this, I see this kind of being like the, back when they wanted to build, what was that? When they wanted to build the other temple in New York that never got built?
Harrison.
Harrison. I thought it was White Plains.
They changed the name, yeah. It was both.
There was talk of building one there, and that was kind of, I believe, going to kind of be this big anchor for the region. And eventually it got booted basically in favor of Boston, and then you've got the temple in Manhattan instead.
Or Connecticut, I thought it was. And
then Connecticut got one.
Yeah, I believe they announced it in Hartford. Then they rescinded that and said, we're going to build one in Harrison and in Boston.
Yeah.
And then that Harrison one got moved to Manhattan.
And
then eventually Hartford got one, but it took a while.
So I have to wonder, like say for Hartford in this case, they looked at Charlotte and were like, they could. You have to think they could have said, all right, this whole region, most of South Carolina, North Carolina, if we put a big temple in Charlotte, it could cover that whole spread, just as the Atlanta temple's been covering a lot of that up until this point. But for some reason, whether it was we have no idea. This is purely speculation. But maybe it was the idea of, hey, we're going to do these mini temples. This is a great opportunity to build a smaller temple that's more localized. Why don't we build 2 of them instead and kind of put them almost equidistant from the Charlotte area, a little bit farther Raleigh is compared to Columbia. And the Saints in Charlotte will be assigned there, but they'll kind of be in between either way, even though Charlotte's a big area.
And that kind of happened in Nashville. Originally, they announced a larger temple in Nashville. but then they decided we're just going to put a mini temple there, and we're going to use
Build
the
one in
resources to
Memphis.
put temples in Memphis and Birmingham and Louisville.
And all that stuff. Nashville got hosed. And their mini temple's not even in Nashville; it's down in Franklin. I mean, come on. Which is like the Franklin Temple is one case where you should almost like call it the Franklin, Tennessee Temple, because it is like far enough away from Metro Nashville. It barely merits being called the
and Franklin is
Nashville
definitely
Temple.
its own city. It's like it's not like just a suburb or a bedroom community, is it?
Yeah, I don't think this is a slam dunk, but I definitely think it's one of the few cases where the temple is so far away from the city for which it's named. It's hard to justify how it's titled at one point. But anywho, it would almost be like if there was a baseball team like in Anaheim and they were named the Los Angeles.
Almost, Jeff.
So weird. So
don't get me started at that one in Mexico, the Torreon Temple that's in Gomez Palacio. Like it's not Torreon;
wow.
It's another state. It's in Gomez Palacio.
Is it in a totally different state too?
Yeah.
See, what are we doing, people? Anyway, Charlotte doesn't have like overwhelming membership despite its size, which is probably another reason why it doesn't have a temple, because you've got a pretty similar number of members out in like Raleigh. You got a decent number of temples in South Carolina. So I would say Charlotte might be like less densely LDS given how big of a metro region it is ish. But I just think in this era where we are building temples with fewer members, like it stands to reason you could build one in Charlotte. I mean, it's such a fast growing area. And not only that, the district for the Columbia Temple goes pretty far out, especially for a mini temple. I mean, Kingsport, Tennessee, is part of its district. That is where that's north of Knoxville. It's weird that one's assigned to that, but Knoxville is assigned to Nashville, I think, right? So Knoxville's assigned to Nashville, but Kingsport, north of that, is assigned to a temple farther south than Knoxville. Okay. Either way, it's way far out there. And then also it goes as far south as like Savannah, Georgia. It covers a big spread. So I think part of this would be to let the Saints from Kingsport, Tennessee, from like Asheville, North Carolina, Greensboro, other areas, not have to go quite as far to get to a temple. I'm sure Savannah elsewhere would still just go up to Columbia. But when you see how spread out this one is, it kind of makes sense to plop a temple kind of right there to nest it between the other areas that are covered. So that's kind of our argument.
Give me the deets on how many stakes it would probably assume into its district.
I believe the Columbia one has 17 stakes assigned to it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have the map up of the entire district.
But is Charlotte split between Columbia and Raleigh? Like the Charlotte metro, like the east side of the metro is kind of like over to Raleigh, or it's just it's all in Columbia's.
It's all in,
district.
baby.
Oh, okay, got it. So
unless I'm wrong, Cory knows.
I would say it's like eight, 9 stakes. There's like
Cory.
four in
knows everything.
Immediate Charlotte.
That's enough, right?
So
Cory knows all things. I was trying to bring up the Columbia, South Carolina temple real quick here, so we could double check because we care about these things.
I don't know. 4 stakes in an American mega metro area, not mega, but in a prominent metro area. That's 4 is a little bit low. I don't know.
So also South Carolina, kudos to South Carolina for having as much membership as it does. So that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've got 9 stakes in South Carolina assigned to that temple. You have 5 from North Carolina, 2 in Georgia, and then the one way up in Tennessee is assigned to it. So you've got 5 in North Carolina. So the dividing line based on the map view, I think it's pretty much all just Charlotte. It's Charlotte in general, Charlotte. Yeah, I mean, if you look at this, there's the temple in Rock Hill, which is basically Charlotte, but it's on the South Carolina side, then like Gastonia, Pineville, another part of Charlotte, and then more going west. So I think somewhere the cutoff line, I did say Greensboro earlier, but that might have been out of turn. I imagine Greensboro is just assigned to Raleigh because it's a lot closer to Raleigh than.
But hey, how many stakes does Manitoba have? For example, I think one.
The one. Also more remote, though. I mean, they had to go all the way to.
They got their second, actually.
Oh, they did? Oh.
Yeah.
Boy, you sound like a fool, Joseph. All right.
What an idiot.
Let's move on to our next one. So we have a lot.
So we're going to the Promised Land, but now we're going to Zion. We're going, of course, Salt Lake City. That's where Zion is.
Yes.
So for a long time, Salt Lake Valley and Utah Valley have kind of mirrored each other in the amount of temples that they have had. But recently, Utah Valley has started to go way ahead. Utah Valley is now at 7 temples. That leaves Salt Lake Valley behind at 5 temples.
And if you look at how many temples have been announced since 2010, between those two, 1 in the Salt Lake Valley and 5 in Utah County.
Oh,
in that time, which is cray.
Yeah. So, like, of course, it's not a competition, but
I'm sure they think it is.
There's still more stakes.
This is that Thor, Geoff. Is it though?
Is it? There's still slightly more stakes in Salt Lake Valley, although they're probably smaller stakes. Utah Valley is probably about to eclipse membership if it hasn't already.
Yeah.
That of Salt Lake. But like you said, in California, that place is Yorba Linda also, losing members. But so there's not really shouldn't be any hesitation for President Nelson to announce another temple in the Salt Lake Valley.
So where?
Do you think we're going to get to a point where it's like the Troubles in Utah, like the Salt Lake Valley is going to crash so hard on membership and Utah County is going to be all righteous and they're just going to it's going to be like the non-Mormons and the Mormons fighting each other like in Northern Ireland?
Is it not that already? I feel like that's pretty...
Well, sure.
We'll have the Zion curtain right there at Point of the Mountain.
Oh, man.
Have a checkpoint. They'll check for your tithing status to see if you can drive into Utah County or not.
My word.
We're not far off from that. Sorry, continue.
Okay, so we discussed Harriman in the past, but this time we've decided on the eastern part of Salt Lake Valley, which is a little bit not specific, but there's a lot of communities around that area. So there's Cottonwood Heights, there's Holiday, there's Murray, there's Midvale, there's, I guess, north of Sandy, maybe. And so something I've noticed is that the Jordan River Temple in South Jordan has a ton of stakes assigned to it, and the Taylorsville Temple will be taking a bunch of those stakes. But there's also a number of stakes on that east bench that would be assigned to either Draper or Salt Lake that actually might find it closer to drive to the temple in Taylorsville. And that is because you can just hop on that 215 and the Taylorsville Temple is right on that exit. And so a lot of those people in that mid-valley area might just find it easier to drive to Taylorsville, even though they're technically assigned to another temple.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And so Taylorsville might be busting at the seams by the time it's dedicated, because it's not like the largest temple. It's larger than Draper or Oquirrh Mountain, but it won't be as large as Salt Lake or Jordan River. So in order to, I guess, persuade more people on that east side to not go to the Taylorsville Temple, hey, why not build another temple?
Why not? It's funny because we've joked about that, but there almost is like a why not approach. I mean, like when we talked about the whole hubbub with the Manti Temple and what they were doing. It was like, why don't we just build another temple then if your concern is capacity? And they're like, well, okay. Okay.
Now this is like the argument that somebody who knows a lot about transportation would make. I think looking at those highways and just traffic flow of where people are going, maybe this temple needs to be here because it's like an air quality situation, right? Like we got to put a temple in East Salt Lake to cut down on the bad air quality that, makes people like us leave Utah.
If that were the case, though, we should build every temple along the tracks line so it has its own stop. That would be...
See, now you're talking.
See? Which is the closest one with that we get is Oquirrh Mountain, because the green line runs by daybreak, but it goes all the way to the other side. But I have to think they run shuttle.
I know all about this. A couple of years ago,
Cory's very happy right now.
I took UTA public transportation to every temple on the Wasatch Front in the period of about a few months.
Dude, where's that article? I love that deep dive.
Seriously, where is this?
I took pictures, so yeah, I should probably...
You should write all about this. And so what did you learn from doing this?
So obviously some are very accessible, like, Provo City Center, it's right there.
Yeah.
Right by bus line. Salt Lake is right there in the downtown. But others that are on the mountains, like Draper or Bountiful, they take a little bit of a hike if you want to get up there.
Are there even buses that run up to Draper? Like, did they even
there was one old bus that did. They've actually, UTA has started this on-demand travel stuff. It's kind of like Uber, but a lot cheaper. So now it's actually technically possible where you could just go to the track station in Draper, hail that ride up to the temple. So
interesting.
They don't make you catch a limo? I'm surprised.
Joe has major feelings about Draper.
I'm pretty transparent with them. It's fine.
That's really fascinating. And so you did the whole Wasatch Front. So you Ogden might not have been too hard, right? I mean,
no, Ogden's right there by the station.
Super easy, yeah.
Brigham City, you do have to take another bus after Ogden. So that when you live in Provo, it takes a while to get to Brigham City by train. So
I imagine, because Front Runner stops in Ogden, right? You can't take that all the way up. So you had to take...
I had to take another bus after Ogden.
Yeah.
And then I ended up actually missing the last train out of Salt Lake by the time I arrived back. So I had to call my aunt and have her give me a ride at midnight. So,
Ooh.
And she's like, "What are you doing up here?" Like, "Oh, nothing.
oh,
Just,
nothing.
I don't want to tell you. It's an experiment." That's funny.
That's actually really fun that you did that.
That
Okay.
is
Now,
very
what
cool.
about going down to like Payson?
There's a bus from Provo to Payson. So
That's it, huh?
only a few blocks away is the bus stop. So.
Oh my gosh, you had the easiest time in the world. I take it back. Well, I'm going to hope for more remote temples on the Wasatch Front then. A temple
Saratoga
somewhere.
Springs would be impossible to get to. If I tried to, I could not do that.
Is there no public transit over there?
There's like one bus that only like goes during the commute times. So
the NIMBYs don't want it.
I think those towns out there too are pretty young. They're probably still expanding their infrastructure.
Don't bring your riffraff over
Right?
there. Yeah. Anyway, I like this idea. It's funny when you look at a map of the Salt Lake Valley because you've got like 3 temples kind of close together in the western part of the valley, but then it's like East Valley, which is the older part of the valley in terms of development, Salt Lake all the way up there, and Draper all the way at the bottom, and kind of inaccessible way up on the top of a hill. And nothing in between in terms of temples on that side of the valley. So it would make sense to have something if it's right around the 215, it'd be kind of like Holiday, Cottonwood Heights area, I would guess, somewhere around there.
Mouth of the Canyons? No, I guess that's too close to Draper.
And the area is pretty developed, so probably like Taylorsville, you'd have to try and find like an old church that doesn't have a lot of wards in it, and probably tear that down.
Oh, I wonder if there is one of those, Cory. Is there?
Well, lucky to say, there was actually a fire in one of those chapels, and the church didn't bother restoring it, so they just put the property up for sale. And I think they haven't sold it yet. So, but there's a park right next to it, and so I would say it's big enough for a temple. If they wanted to do it, they could do it.
And since you shared this with us, we've all looked at it, and it's definitely big enough. I mean, you got the church property and this massive park behind it. I think the only issue is can you have a driveway on that part of Wasatch Boulevard, or is that treated kind of like a highway right there?
I've been learning a lot about access in my transportation classes lately, and it is difficult sometimes to get access to highways. And I don't think the neighbors would really like a lot of traffic going through their neighborhood.
Probably
on the
not.
Other side.
On the other side,
you might have like a DC temple kind of a situation.
Hey, the neighbors, by and large, like the temple there,
except at Christmas time.
It does get a little busy.
This is one, though, I have to say, like, when you first brought it to our attention, Cory, it was like, kind of this big, oh, duh moment. It's like, this feels obvious, too, in a way that, like, we just didn't ever think about. I didn't ever think about, East Bench, Salt Lake area, Salt Lake Valley.
I mean, we've joked about, like, Sugar House in the past. Or,
right.
I wouldn't mind Mount Olympus. Not that it's as dense over there, but that could also be
could
be a nice, like, prominent location too, visually for a temple in the valley. All right, going to another valley, albeit one much drier,
and hotter.
Las Vegas, folks. We've talked about Vegas before in the past. I was surprised our collective voting led us into Las Vegas number 2. Admittedly, I don't know if it'll totally happen, but I just think, like, with the way the tone has been and metropolitan areas or cities getting second temples, it seems like Vegas can make a lot of sense. I mean, the region's grown quite a bit in terms of membership in recent years. Las Vegas is substantially more densely Latter-day Saint than many other metro areas. Nevertheless, it still has the one temple. It's a bigger temple, but it's been there since the 90s. And it might be time for us to grow and have another one. I don't know if they would even call it Las Vegas West or something like that. And that's been our big debate, right? Like we said, like, would it go somewhere down by Henderson, which famously has a lot more members of the church, but that's still the east side of the valley? That would just be kind of clustering your temples in the same general geographic area. So I don't know if it would go there. So my money, if we do this, is on the western part of the valley. There are 3 new stakes in the western and northwestern part of the Las Vegas Valley, only the past like 7 years. So I think growth's a little bit hotter on that side of the valley. And it pains me to say it. It would probably pain Joe the most because it would probably go somewhere around Summerlin, which is like the Draper.
It's like a Draper.
With
Adelson too. Gosh, I saw that.
You liked my line about Sheldon Adelson? That was just for you.
All right, I mean, indeed.
It could make sense. There's still room for new development. The church, oftentimes when these temples get plopped into like brand new master plan communities, the church actually contracts with the company building it and gets the utilities put into the temple site as part of it, like for free. they could easily leverage that into a new temple in that area. And so I think it's likely Vegas could have a second temple. It would be essentially like straight due west of where the current one is. Like they could probably see each other across the valley with the right lighting at night, because the one in Vegas is slightly up a hill and you've got a great view of the valley. So I could see this being a thing, if not this conference, maybe the next one. But and I
This
do
is
think
definitely
Summerlin.
one I keep rooting for just because I feel like it makes a lot of sense. But also, maybe this was the first temple open house I ever went to in the '90s as like a little kid,
Presh.
and
Presh.
that was pretty cool. Putting the little like booties on the shoes, and that whole
Yeah.
thing. It was just like
Yeah.
mind blowing.
There we go.
Yeah, and last conference, Fort Worth was announced, and so in the DFW area, that's a little bit more of a good separation. You kind of knew where that second temple would be, but it's about the same size. The temple's about the same age, and the district's about also the same
That's an
amount.
interesting core. That's the second time you brought that similar
Oh,
correlation.
but the Metroplex has way more people than Vegas.
But is
Yeah,
there's the same? There's about the same amount of members, probably.
And that's probably true. The same amount of members, though. Yeah, and the temple in Dallas is even older than the one in Vegas. Yeah,
By
but
like 5 years, yeah.
Vegas is interesting to me because it sort of follows that what I always call the stake center design, that kind of tent that goes back. But feels like it's much more like hunched up and bulky than the other ones, if that makes any sense. If you look at its design and its size,
yeah.
the other ones look a little simpler, like Boise and Chicago and Dallas. But Vegas just looks like it's one of those kind of on roids a little bit. It's
It's
just an
like in the
interesting
early
design.
2000s when all the classic car models got like chunky, and then it's like the new model.
There we go.
So let's stay in the West, though. Are we done with Vegas here?
Yeah, we're
Let's
good.
move on
Let's pick up the pace.
to
Let's move
my
along.
home state of Arizona. But I really want to, I mean, yeah, the guest is in Arizona, but I want to pitch kind of like this concept that I feel like is an interesting theory. So, all these temples that we're seeing in, I don't know, how do I describe it? Kind of these smaller but not too small kind of regional areas, maybe these these cities and towns that are perhaps more regionally important than
Yeah.
their population might suggest. Something like Elko, which it's like it's not a big town, but there's nothing else around, so it's kind of like the town. um well, other ones, Cody, Casper, both in Wyoming, Springfield, Oregon, Farmington, New Mexico, Grand Junction, Colorado. All of these that are kind of like in the far flung. I kind of view like if Utah was like the tabernacle, and then like these are the far flung stakes that are like still close enough in Utah to be like within its orbit, but they're definitely on that hinterland before you get into the quote unquote mission field.
Yeah.
And so some of those like tertiary regional hubs, towns, things like that, that are all getting temples, right? Like all those towns I just named, all the cities I just named, all have been announced for getting temples in recent years. And so, kind of looking at the map through that lens, I feel like you see a few bare places, and Northern Arizona is certainly one of those. We drove through Flagstaff recently. That's kind of like the big one that comes to mind. And boy, that town is a lot bigger now than it was even when I grew up. It's just kind of had its own population explosion, but it's also kind of like this nexus where all these major freeways and routes to different places sort of intersect. And so, it's a very literal hub, even railway, that kind of a thing. And so it's like, well, where's this sort of secondary but important regional cities temple kind of a thing? But then, you look at the stakes and the member population too, and that influences certainly where the likely destinations could be. I think you have kind of this swath of membership that starts sort of in Flagstaff, but it goes down to like down through Sedona, Prescott Valley,
Mm-hmm.
Clarkdale, Cottonwood, Prescott. And Prescott, has a long history of old, like some good old boy old timer, stakes and members are there. And so I feel like that's kind of like the territory that we're looking at that would be ripe for a temple. And Prescott Valley is sort of smack dab in the middle. It's not too far from Flagstaff. It's close to Prescott. And so I think that is sort of like, if I was looking at a dartboard of all of these cities that are getting these modular temples, that one is got to be next in my read of the map. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No, I think the Santan Valley in Arizona will be getting the next temple.
I mean, yeah, we went back and forth between Flagstaff and Prescott, but I think, yeah, either. I mean, I still think it's either way, but I think, yeah, Prescott could be a huge
And they're both
possibility.
kind of on the edge. If you do like the 2-hour drive thing,
Mm-hmm.
I learned a long time ago Flagstaff is about 2 hours from Phoenix because my sister went to school in Flagstaff and would always say,
Two?
it's like 2 hours to Phoenix.
It's
To
3.
Phoenix, to
Oh, to
Phoenix.
Phoenix. Yeah, you're right.
And if you look at it, if you look at a drive from where the Phoenix Temple is to Flagstaff, yeah, it kind of just it's like right there on the edge. Prescott's kind of right in there on the edge. So I'm down with this too. I would say Kingman could go along with it, but it's funny when you look at a map because Kingman is on the very far edge of distance from the Vegas Temple, which I believe it's assigned to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know if it would actually be any quicker if you're in Kingman to drive to Prescott than it would be to Vegas.
No, I think
When it gets
Henderson
down to
is
it.
quicker for sure.
Because Prescott's not on an interstate, so you'd have to
No,
go
I
to
mean
one of those
famously
state highways.
there is no interstate that runs straight from Vegas to Phoenix, which is something they intend to remedy allegedly at some point in the
Oh,
future.
I hope
But
not.
yeah.
But yeah, you can be assured that if President Nelson announces a temple in Prescott, he's really good at pronunciations, so he won't say Prescott. So
Fun fact, I guess I could be wrong because it's been a long time since I've been a student in Arizona, but I believe Prescott used to be the capital. It was like the capital for a short period of time.
I don't know. You're from there,
I'm
Joseph,
not
so
from
you tell
Prescott
me.
though. It's like, I learned that when you learn like what the state bird is and that kind of a thing, which I don't even know.
4th grade history.
Yeah, exactly.
Arizona Territory capitals: Tucson, Prescott, second
There
tenure,
you go.
Phoenix. You're very welcome. It's like how Milford should still be Millard, Milford, Fillmore. Thank you, Fillmore.
Oh, Fillmore, yeah, the
Fillmore
Utah Territorial
should still be the capital of Utah.
should be.
It's interesting to think about the Pioneer. This is a total digression, but when we think about the Pioneer era back then, I mean, Fillmore was the territorial capital of Utah, and Brigham Young, part of the reason they built the temple in Manti, too, is Brigham Young thought that part of central Utah was going to be like the center of civilization in the state. It is
interesting.
Not.
Along those same lines, if you want a fun deep dive, read the Wikipedia page for Corinne, Utah. It was established as like the non-Mormon town that was going to be like this big,
gonna eclipse
sophisticated city. Yeah, exactly.
But then they built Park City, and it was fine.
Okay, well let's leave the Americas. Let's go to the continent of Africa. So this one's kind of easy because there's always a running list of the countries with the most members without a temple. And so currently, the country of Uganda sits on that list, the highest part on the list. As number one, has the most members. As of year in 2019, it was 17,000, I think, and around there. And then there's 3 states and 3 districts. And so always that spot that's on number one, it usually within a few years it gets announced. So it's pretty close to Kenya. So you could say, well, maybe it's not like the one in Kenya needs to be built first. But I looked up on Google and it would take approximately 13 hours to drive to Nairobi. So I'm not sure how accessible that is in actuality.
That's a lot more than 2.
A lot more than 2. I mean, yeah, it's only like 3 states and 3 districts, but I think you make a good case for the isolation angle here. And the fact that it's atop the list.
Yeah.
Which I looked up the list when we were talking about this, by the way. And the only thing that takes me back is I think, is this its first year on top of the list, Uganda?
Sounds right.
I don't remember. Only because, well, I think almost everything, like you said, that is on the list of most members without a temple has eventually received one at some point in the near-ish future. Yeah. Kiribati was number 1 before that, but then they had a temple announced. So now it's Uganda. It's just not always immediate. Like we called for a temple for a long time in Kiribati. We called for a temple for a long time in Nicaragua, which was at the top of the list. And it still took a while. So it might not be like this conference. That's only my cautionary remark, but it might still be because the calculus has changed quite a bit. So who knows? The funny thing is the list has, as long as there's no functional temple, you make the list, right? So 2, 3, and 4 on the list are Mozambique, Liberia, and Madagascar, all of which have had temples announced. So the next one on the list is Mongolia, which is officially not part of the discussion this week, folks. Spoiler for all of you. But
I looked for it too. I scrolled up and down the whole document like 8 times.
Cross your fingers for Mongolia, right? I think so. I think that there's a good case to be made for it. I made a point in the written part here. If people want to read the article, I really want number 7 though to get a temple as well, and some have called for this: a temple in the Republic of the Congo. This is me geo nerding out, right? The Republic of the Congo is not the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They are separate countries, largely because of relics of European colonialism and stuff like that. But their capital cities, Brazzaville and Kinshasa, respectively, are across the Congo River from one another. They are the 2 national capitals located closest to one another in the world. Okay? And so Kinshasa has a temple. And Congo's got lots of members as well. If you build a temple in Brazzaville, it would just be a fun, random little factoid where you would have 2 sovereign nation capitals, the closest together, with temples in each one, literally across the river from one another, even though they're different countries. What a fun random,
interesting.
Surprisingly, those 2 big cities, they don't even have a bridge between them, so you still have to take a ferry.
Yeah.
So I saw some plans on the internet of maybe some proposals to build a bridge in the next few years.
Build the bridge to nowhere.
We'll see if that happens.
Build this
Vincenzo,
wall.
Build this bridge. Wait, no, how does it go?
Vincenzo, I would not burn the bridge.
Oh, burn the bridge. Yeah, don't do that.
Well, we're doing Vincenzo, right?
I know. I was quoting it.
The funniest thing when I was a kid, when you watch How Great a Possession, is like in your mind, you're thinking it's all about Catholicism, and like Vincenzo was like a Methodist or something like that. Talk about being an interesting minority in Italy at the time. Anyway,
that's why he felt free to change his faith.
Yeah, it might have been. Let's swing back to the United States, everybody, for a pick we've had here and there, but I think it's worth considering once more. You've got a number of temples in Texas. We were just talking about the Metroplex a bit ago. There's a temple in Dallas. There's one coming in Fort Worth. There's a temple in San Antonio. There's a temple in Houston. There's a temple in Lubbock. There's a temple being built in McAllen, right down there on the southern border. But there should be a temple in Austin. Now, Austin sits close enough geographically and time-wise to San Antonio. It's fine in that sense, right? Not a big deal. And you could even drive to Houston in not a crazy amount of time if you needed to. And it's only like 3 hours to get up to Dallas. But there has been a lot of growth in Austin because Austin's just this hot place to be. All of you listening know someone who's moved to Austin. I can all but guarantee.
Yeah, Elon Musk. Come on.
That's because he's a whiner and doesn't want to.
We all know him.
Tax himself into glory in California. But I think that's one of the main things here. I think is it's growing so quickly that they've organized, 3 stakes in the past, just handful of years, I want to say. I think I don't have the stat right in front of me, which I should. I wrote it, but I don't remember exactly.
I think you said in the last 10 years, they've organized 3 stakes.
Yeah. No, 3 of the stakes aren't even 10 years old.
Oh.
Yeah. And they could take in some other stakes nearby, maybe even the Kyle stake, which covers San Marcos. If you did this in that structure, it would just split the San Antonio district in half, which would be fine. The San Antonio district is a smaller temple, kind of like mini 2.0, like more like Sacramento, Lubbock, Newport Beach, Redlands, that style one. A little bit bigger than the Hinckley mini temples. So I have to imagine that would be okay, especially if you built one of similar size. I don't know I think it would call for one slightly larger than even the modular ones, maybe like a Yorba Linda one, like a 30,000 square foot temple. That's fine. But Austin's such a hotbed of activity and growth, and people are moving in. I don't know what the missionary work situation is like there, but no matter what, you're getting people from elsewhere who are coming in there. I do wonder if growth might slow a bit, just because as we've seen real estate prices go up all over the country. Austin has been severely affected by that, kind of in a way Utah has, where it's become even far more out of reach than it even used to be. And that can make it harder for people to move into the metropolitan area. When before they were moving, they're saying Austin's cool, it's awesome, it's got all this great stuff, and it's affordable. It's affordable part of the equation might
be
under threat. Whereas San Antonio still is more affordable than Austin, and it already has the temple.
Yeah.
So that's a consideration.
I think, though, you do got to consider that corridor between Austin and Waco, including Waco, too, to be...
Waco sucks.
Yeah, but, they need a temple. I mean, they don't need a temple in Waco.
It's just like, what?
But think about who... I mean, I'm trying to think, who could they recruit to, be on the design team for the temple that would service Waco? something about like barns in
Yeah,
Waco,
some silos.
like a HGTV show designer, something like that. Oh, you know what they should do is they should put that little curtain of like what it used to look like and pull it aside
Pull it apart. As
after
long as they can get
dedication. Man, if they
like a
don't do that,
really,
I'm going to be so disappointed.
if they can get like a really goofy red faced strawberry blonde guy to be the designer. Yeah,
So
I'm glad.
good.
Here's the upside to Waco. That show has kind of rehabilitated the whole city's image because
Yeah.
we had the whole Branch Davidian nonsense back in the '90s, right? And that's all everyone thought about for Waco for a
Yeah,
very, very
people don't
long
think
time. And
that so much
now
anymore.
everyone's like, I want to go to Magnolia Farms. I want to see the silos. It's gonna be great.
Although I do recommend Waco, the series is really good. It kind of goes through that whole Branch Davidian
I
history.
mean, Baylor's there too, right? So you
True.
got a university. But anyway, so Austin, it could happen. It could happen to you.
Are we at my pick now?
Yeah, we're at your favorite one.
This is my wild card, and I have to be honest. As I was going through this, I feel like I zoomed in on Des Moines, Iowa. I don't know, a couple months ago, and I was, like I said, perusing the map and like, oh, there's a glaring obvious spot that would be a good guess, and I didn't
I'm
really
only
like.
laughing at this. I wasn't going to laugh at Des Moines before, but because you texted me and were like, I don't know what I was thinking. Sorry, I don't want to spoil this, but just continue.
I don't know what I was thinking. It was I kind of like did not do my due diligence when I thought, oh, that's a curious spot. I think I just jumped to that's a curious spot. Done. It's going to go on the list. So when it came time to finally write the article and I pulled up the maps and I was like, making my notes, I was just like, there is nothing here. What's going on? So, looking at where the stakes are in Iowa, particularly in Des Moines, because that's sort of like right in the middle of the state. And you have a situation where like you have some other population centers in the state that are closer to the borders and they, are assigned to other temples that are nearby in other states like Nauvoo and the one in Winter Quarters, which is
Yeah.
basically Omaha. So that pretty much just leaves, I mean, if you're talking about Des Moines, which is the pick, that leaves the stakes in Des Moines, which are like 2, and then one in Ames, Iowa, which is basically, close enough to Des Moines to be, I think, in its metro orbit. So, it's another one of those, like, there's 3 stakes. Do we want to give 3 stakes to, in the middle of Iowa, another temple? So I guess it's kind of like Charlotte. Same. Maybe it's not as bad of a guess as I thought, but I did note, and readers of the article will see this. Cedar Rapids, I think, is the second biggest city in Iowa, and it's closer to Des Moines. So if there's a temple in Des Moines, they would be technically under 2 hours to a temple.
Yeah.
Whereas right now they have to go to Nauvoo, which is 2 hours away. So
4 stakes.
Right, exactly. But Des Moines would be like an hour and 59 minutes. So it's technically under 2 hours.
1 minute closer, Gene. So with Nauvoo, how much do I don't have any answer to this, but how much does like the church lean on Nauvoo being, for lack of a better expression, a like legitimate temple to serve the region versus a historically important temple that we love for that purpose? I don't know, Cory. I don't know. You might have read. You know what I mean? I know we don't know.
Yeah, I understand.
Like if Nauvoo weren't steeped in church history, would we still build a temple in that area because it merits the region it serves, and they need one anyway?
I doubt.
Definitely not that part.
Yeah,
there probably would have been one in Des Moines earlier if that's
or Cedar Rapids or
Cedar
Peoria
Rapids.
or somewhere else.
Because like their schedule is shorter. They don't have as many sessions during the winter as they do during the summer. Because during the summer, most of it's tourists.
It's a tourist temple. I've never been. It seems delightful though.
Well, it would make sense they don't have winter sessions because those would be in Winter Quarters, obviously.
Joe, when you were writing the article and kept saying "consider," I was getting major like First Nephi 11 vibes.
I don't know if that's what I was intentionally going for, but I'm happy that that's. Yeah, if you look at the where the Nauvoo temple is, there aren't really any stakes in its immediate vicinity. So I guess if you need that temple to have,
Sorry, I was going to say the mobs kind of took care of that one, didn't they? Sorry.
Yeah,
Too soon?
if you need to have like a local membership to keep that temple going, then that might sort of make a good case to not have a Des Moines, simply because I don't know what would happen with Cedar Rapids and like Iowa City and that stuff. But I guess in Peoria too, which would not go to a Des Moines, so they would have maybe one, maybe two
No.
stakes. But
Yeah,
they get a
Northwest
lot of tourism there, which I'm
There's plenty of
sure like
missionaries. Yeah,
have exactly. And I
yeah,
mean, they might not have the. Do they have the pageant, or is that the one pageant that stayed?
they're still doing that. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
see, so there you go. Everyone that's in the pageant is probably going to go like every week that they're there for that. So yeah, it's the tourism temple. That's fine. They can keep it open when the tour buses come through.
Booyah.
Okay, so here's my shot in the dark. Um, last time I was here, I purchased a temple in Rexburg North, and of course that was announced. And
You
so that
crushed
was
Yes,
it,
it
man.
was. Pat
almost
yourself on the
everyone
back
was
for that
saying.
one.
Everyone was saying that was unthinkable, too small. But obviously there's a lot of members there, and so I guess continuing on with the Austin Charlotte argument, out of all the small temples that size in the United States, probably the most busy, the ones that have the most stakes are San Antonio and Columbia, and so I'd say number 3 would be Spokane. But the Spokane district is pretty like compact. There's not really a city in the far out region that could have a temple. So if you were to split that temple district, you need a temple probably in northern Idaho. And so I'm guessing Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. There's 3 stakes in the area. One of them is new. Post Falls was just created a few weeks ago. There's another one in Sandpoint, Moscow, Lewiston. So there's like 6 stakes in the area, and then that would leave um, Spokane with another 6, 8, 7. So um, yeah, I think Idaho needs more temples. It needs to catch up to Utah.
Do you think there's any risk? Because I'm assuming when the Helena Temple is done, it's going to, because there's Montana stakes that go to Spokane right now. I mean, you've got the
We'll probably
Ronan,
take
Montana
Missoula.
stake, which is like Kalispell, Missoula, and Stevensville. I'm assuming if you get farther up northern Montana, that's when you cross over into Cardston, I would guess. I'm assuming those 3 stakes at least are going to get put over to Helena when Helena's done. So that would, you couldn't keep those. So Spokane would lose those 3 plus the 6 or 7 stakes on the Idaho side.
So yeah, I put that into my calculations. Basically, probably a clean line at the Idaho border. I would say split the 2 temples. The temple in Spokane is on a large piece of land. Theoretically, they could expand it, I guess. But I think something that the church has learned, that renovating and expanding temples is as expensive as building new temples. And so I think people prefer just to build new temples in another area that makes it more accessible for other people.
That's true. It's almost be like the Manti approach in a way. I mean, I know like of the mini temples, they've rebuilt a few. I think the only ones they've substantially expanded, Anchorage, I know for sure, got like a second story put on later on or something like that, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of the other mini temples had substantial extensions put on them other than that.
Yeah, all the mini ones that have been renovated so far, they're the exact same, almost the exact same square footage, the same ordinance capacity. But most of those have kind of on a lot that's kind of limited. While Spokane has like 3 baseball fields around it, so they have like a ton of room if they wanted to expand.
And you want to talk about how limited they are. I don't think I'd ever really seen one of the real mini temples in that kind of environment until I was in Louisville once. I'd been up to Palmyra. Palmyra was on its own little lot. The Sacred Grove's nearby. It's got a lot of space. But when you're in Louisville, this is like what they're thinking with mini temples. It is like wedged right across the door from the church building. The church building itself is bigger. There's the parking. And then it's literally like if you were to walk out of your typical oval shaped stake center, and in the distance it would take you to walk out the side door and to the cars that are parked facing away from the building. If it's like that, you're like already on the temple property. If even that far, like they really did find interesting ways to snug these little temples into these locations. It's kind of funny too. It almost, the temple seemed like, it's not that it's not a temple, but it almost seems like so like this cute little appendage next to your stake center that it's hard to remember that it's like, no, this is like the big deal. This is a temple with the temple and everything.
I wrote about this. Yeah, I wrote about this last summer. I have the aerial shots of all these temples where they're kind of like, you can tell that the temple is like a second thought after the meeting house.
Yeah. Interesting. Alrighty. Well, here's one I've done before too, dear friends. I love Spanish Fork. Spanish Fork. It's a treasure beyond measure. What a pleasure. So, we've talked about Spanish Fork in the past, right? That's not altogether new. But I still think it's there. Nothing's really changed as far as I know. I don't think there's been any new stakes that have been organized since we last spoke about Spanish Fork. I just think that as we keep seeing temples go up in Utah County, because Linden has still baffled me even since this time. Like, that's incredible to me. I know it merits it for sure. But the fact that you announced a temple in Orem, which I think for a long time we wondered if they would do, just given the fact that you had Provo City Center in Provo, but nope, you get a big old temple in Orem. And then Little Linden, just over the line from the northern side of Orem, also gets a temple.
That's an even larger temple, yeah.
Yeah, that's been the thing that has made me feel more bullish about this. Southern Utah County, it's kind of like, this is kind of the edge of the Wasatch Front in a economic and social sense, right? It's wherever area code 801 peters out and becomes 435. That's like Southern Utah County right there. It's not as dense, you kind of go south of Provo and Springville's kind of there, and then things thin out a little bit more than what you're used to when you go from Provo all the way up through Ogden, right? Where it's just that's where everybody lives. But the area is growing a lot. I can't tell you how many people I know who have, when they've moved to Utah to cash out especially before Utah's market went crazy, and they've all built homes in like Mapleton, right? That's a place. I want to build a nice house in Mapleton, and it's going to be great. There's a lot of people moving in. There's plenty of new construction. I don't see this as an area that's going to contract in both new move-ins and just general growth in terms of members anytime soon. I think Southern Utah County is slowly going to get to the developed level of the core portion of Utah County of Provo through Lehigh. I think little by little, you're going to see a lot more fully consistent built-in development stretching all the way from Springville through Payson, which is a lot of it's there right now, but really filling it in along the freeway and fanning out throughout the valley portions. And so with that being the case, you could easily put a temple in Spanish Fork. You could take out a handful of 13 stakes or so that are assigned to the Payson Temple right now. You could take Springville's 8 stakes. You could put those all together, and you take Springville stakes from Provo City Center, by the way. If you do all this, you've got 21 stakes in Provo City Center Temple. Payson still has 16 stakes, but they'll probably get more pretty quickly as time goes on. And a Spanish Fork Temple would have 21 stakes. That largely goes with some of the balances of the average number of stakes assigned per temple in Utah County. In general, it's not like perfect, but like the average right now, since we were talking about total members, there's an average of 25 stakes per temple in Utah County right now. So that would put Payson kind of under the line significantly for a little while. But
and isn't Payson one of those like 80,000 square? I mean, it's gargantuan too.
Almost every temple in Utah is like the 80,000 thing. I mean, the only temple they've announced that's less than 70,000 is the Ephraim one. Every other temple announced in Utah is big. So you could say, if you're trying to keep that average up, I could get that. But think about that. If the average is 25 stakes, that means Payson has too many. And that means Provo City Center is just under with 21. And so we have to ask ourselves which ones have a lot more. How many stakes is Saratoga Springs going to wind up having? How many stakes is Timpanogos going to keep, especially when Linden is done? Curious how that'll shake out, but I could see a very strong argument for that part of it, the area getting a temple. Because before Payson and Provo City Center went in, I mean, Provo was it. Yeah. You got nothing else going south until St. George. I mean, you got Manti, inland in a bit more. But then back then there was nothing until St. George. So that's my call.
Unfortunately, I can see it. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I had some reservations, like what you said about Payson or Pearl City, but like there's going to be enough growth down there that in the long run it won't matter.
Yeah, you make a good case.
Well, thank you kindly.
Should we head down back to South America?
Head down the old South America
Yeah,
way,
this is.
down to
I think
Portugal.
I feel. Yeah, I feel about the Portugal of South America, if you will, because it clings that western border of the continent.
That's what they call it too. That's what they always have. They say it's the Portugal of South America. That's what
Obviously,
everyone
yeah,
says. That's what
exactly.
everyone says.
So I feel the way about Chile that I think Cory feels about Peru. I feel like it's one of those. They have a lot of stakes in Chile, and it's been under templed, I think, for a long time. So what does that catch up look like?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think, just looking at the existing temples in Chile, they all have, large districts, a large number of stakes in each district. So this time, because I have not had necessarily good luck with some of my other places, except for my second one in Santiago, which I guessed last conference. But I zoomed in on the Concepcion temple district and kind of looked for some natural um, clusters within that district that would kind of split it in half. I know a lot of people are saying Osorno in the kind of cluster of medium to large size cities that are south of Concepcion. Um, but I'm going to go for, I don't even know how to say all these words, Valdivia, um, just because I think that is more centrally located from all of the cities that have like 2 to 3 stakes in that southern region. And so that's the guess. It is Valdivia. I think if I had my druthers, I would probably think the next Chilean temple would be in Punta Arenas down at the very bottom tip. But
Hello.
we've already kind of covered that ground too. So this is, I think, a solid guess. Certainly it has enough membership in that region to service a temple fairly well. Probably, if it's like a 20 to 30,000 square foot temple, like no problem. 2 instruction rooms, 2 ceiling rooms. I think it would be to answer that like rumor that you introduced at the beginning, Geoff, where it's like, is there enough members to like staff these temples that are just going in everywhere? I think this one would have plenty, and it would probably be blessing for the saints in that area. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, yeah. Like you said, it's right. Valdivia is right in between Temuco and Osorno, which also has 2 stakes. I guess we pointed out that Osorno is where the mission is located, so it seems like kind
That's
of the
true.
church infrastructure is in that area. But I guess that doesn't necessarily limit where a temple can go.
No, but it could still happen. So I don't know. I could see the case for any of these. I would be more excited if they announced the Punta Arenas one, though. I think that would just
Absolutely.
be like
That would be way cooler.
bottom of the world, man. That's awesome. That would be kind of neat. All right. Last main guess, everybody, and it's one that's also come up before. I've been all domestic this time around. That's just been my jam.
There you
It
go.
turns out. I'll just lead off with what I wrote. What do you give the land of Air Force cadets, NORAD, Fort Carson, and evangelical megachurch headquarters? You give them a temple, everybody, and preferably with a Moroni statue, just to make a statement this time around.
I was going to say disdain, but yeah, I got you.
Yeah, sure. So we're speaking of Colorado Springs, Colorado. And once again, it is not more than 200 miles away from the nearest temple in Denver. It's not more than 2 hours from the temple in Denver, especially because Colorado Springs lies roughly an hour and change-ish south of Denver. And the temple in Denver is in southern Denver. Okay, so it's already closest to where the temple is in that metropolitan area. But there hasn't been like gangbusters growth in the area or anything like that. But there's like enough members where this makes sense to me, where I see the fact that you've got what's like 5 stakes in the immediate Colorado Springs area. There's a stake down in Pueblo, an hour or so south of the Springs. There's a stake in Kansas that's currently assigned to Denver as well. It would potentially hurt the Denver temple. Denver's a fast growing area, but it still might hurt it to lose that many members. But the Denver temple has handled losing a similar number of members to the Fort Collins. Give me the name
Fort
of
Collins.
it.
Fort Collins, yeah.
Thank you. The Fort Collins temple up north of Denver, which is about the same distance away from Denver as Colorado Springs is from the rest of Denver. So I think they could do it again. And another reason I think that as well, if I look at my native DC temple, right? We lost about a third of our temple district to Philadelphia when Philadelphia was dedicated.
And then
And
Richmond.
we're going to lose a bunch more to Richmond when Richmond is done.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean the temple is not going to keep going and we're not going to be okay. If anything, it might be easier because Saturdays are insane there. And so it could be kind of nice. It could still be a very good thing, and it would serve the Saints well. It absolutely, they don't have to travel crazy far right now to get to the temple. But to me, it seems like Colorado seems like should have more temples. We've got the 2, and we've got another one going up in Grand Junction, which is out in the west and like barely factors into this discussion about anything along the Front Range. So I think it's time. I think we should have this. I want this. I need this. This is the temple I need.
I don't know if it's going to happen, but I don't think it would be surprising if it did. In some ways, I think Colorado Springs really fits, kind of like what I was saying about Flagstaff and some of those other cities. And so, if you think about it in terms of maybe it doesn't need to be a very large temple, maybe even one of the modular ones, make it happen.
I think it's too big of an area for a modular one, though. I think it would
5 stakes in one city. That's pretty big.
I think it would get a 30 to 40,000 square footer, maybe.
Well, okay then.
That would serve it okay.
Like a Billings?
Like a Billings. Cory, you noted allegedly, I'd love to know your sources, that the church has a piece of land that might be set aside for a temple already?
Supposedly, maybe in Northgate.
Somewhere up there, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. If it is, there's an open spot of land there. It's interesting to me, though, because if it's in Northgate, that's like very far on the northern periphery of the Colorado Springs area. And if you're already traveling north to go to the temple and you're already at Northgate, by that point, you're like not even, you're like
almost
40
Denver.
minutes. You're maybe 40 minutes from Denver at that point or so. That's a little funny to me because you want to try to spread it out. Colorado Springs is not like evenly developed as far as encircling the downtown area. It really fans out to the north and the east more than anywhere else. So it works. But even with that, that site is still pretty far out there.
Shout out to Matt Martinick at the LDS Growth blog. He lives in Colorado Springs, so for a long time he's been advocating for.
He's just a booster then. He's just a cheerleader.
But I think that's what his guess is for that property. So,
by the way, you might know about the Temple Matrix, folks. If you go to sites.google.com/view/Temple Matrix, every conference, the creator of it keeps track of everyone who predicts temples and where they fall. We'll link to that and you can check it out. A number of our picks are on there this week and a number of them are not, because number 1 on the list this time is Kampala, Uganda, then the Philippines, then Iquitos, then a couple others in Brazil, Ribeiro and Preto in Brazil, then good old Mongolia, then Charlotte, then Uyo, Nigeria, which frankly might be one we should have discussed, Edinburgh, Scotland, Spanish Fork, Utah, Colorado Springs. That's where we're ranking right now. These ranks will change, of course, by the time this is published because they always incorporate ours into it.
Well, we always have some really good ones in the honorable mentions. And
let's crank through a couple of those real quick, or all of them. We've actually got a pretty long list of honorable mentions stuff. Well, Ulaanbaatar, we talked about it, Mongolia. I promised last time around I was not going to include it in the predictions, which is why I fully expect it to be announced this time. So by being an honorable mention, it covers my butt, but it's still not officially a prediction.
You took one for the team to make it happen.
Yeah.
As long as you were including it, it wasn't going to happen. Yeah. Punta Arenas, Chile. I mentioned that one. I still think that's like a really fantastic pick.
Last time I talked about Fairbanks.
Yeah.
Also super north, super south.
I could see happening. We've talked a lot about Tacoma, Washington, kind of the same argument as somewhere like Las Vegas or elsewhere. It's not crazy far from Seattle, but there's members there. It could make sense. Could be a good spot for one. A lot of growth.
You mentioned Knoxville in good depth in the conversation.
Yeah, and the more you think about Knoxville, you could kind of see sort of a Smoky Mountains temple kind of making sense for that broader area. Huh?
I think it's a cool spot.
I have my sources on maybe a property in Lehigh up there in Traverse Mountain. So right there in between Timpanogos and Saratoga Springs. So if you want another Utah Valley temple, that might be it.
But the one in Lehigh, but you think it would be along some big like redevelopment? What makes you think that a temple's involved in this development of the the Micron area?
There was the city council meeting where the developer at D.R. Horton, they kind of spilled the beans. They said, "Hey, we're working with the church, but there might be some sort of development there." So,
wow!
Church
price. I like that pick. That's a good one.
A lot of people have kind of said Price in the past.
I feel like it's got a similar vibe to Heber Valley.
I think it's going to go in Roosevelt.
Ooh.
That's right.
Maybe.
A couple of ones. El Paso, Texas. We've talked about El Paso a lot in the past. I still feel bullish about that one at some point, even though it's right across the border from. There's a temple in Ciudad Juarez, but bit of a different beast. So I still think that's a decent possibility.
I don't know about that one. Cancun. That's your mission area, right, Cory?
Yeah, I'm too biased. I couldn't make it my official choice, so I just put it there in the honorable mention.
Does Cancun actually merit this in terms of member? I mean, there's temple in Merida, right?
So there's 4 stakes in the area, and Merida's pretty far away. There's like 5 hours away.
But Cancun would be where Belize would go to, right? Or no? Oh no, that's the what one?
Yeah,
was that
Cancun's
one?
on the eastern
Perhaps.
coast.
I think sometimes they go to Merida, so yeah, they might go to Cancun.
They might go to Cancun, or they just make it the Tulum temple, and
there you go.
They have a Mayan temple there. So.
The Chichen Itza.
Ooh,
temple.
That's true.
All we do
we
do something really tacky when we say we want to emulate the native design, the historic designs, and we literally build a replica of Chichen Itza, but the inside's hollow and it's like a temple on the inside.
Yeah, there you go.
You could argue that the Mexico City temple.
My mission president would be ecstatic if that happened.
Yeah.
Peoria, I don't know. Piura? I don't know how to say that.
Piura, Chiclayo. I argued this one last time. That's the northern coast of Peru.
Got it.
We talked about Chiclayo last time.
Oh, for Pete's sake, Geoff. Barcelona.
What's wrong with me saying Barcelona? I'm not the only one.
I'm just kidding. I'm just giving you a hard
time. And all
time.
of us are naming missions just because Amsterdam, just because the Netherlands has one already.
Yeah, and Joseph. Brussels inexplicably got another one. I don't even. That one just completely surprised me.
The European temple announcements in the past year, I think, have left Lavos like that's. You want to make the case. The one that kills me is the temple in Budapest and the temple in Vienna.
Yeah,
those two. I never in my wildest dreams. I assumed it would have to be one or the other.
I would totally include Brussels in that too. I mean, Brussels has like half of a stake. It's like
what I think happened was some of the brethren. Which one was first? Budapest was announced first, I think. Of those two, right? Budapest came before
Budapest.
Vienna. I think they announced the one in Budapest. And then they're like, guys, did you know this was like one country at one time? Did you know it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire and it was it was a shared capital between Vienna and Budapest? I think for historic reasons, we can't not put one in Vienna now because that would be just very rude.
Oh.
And then someone told them about Viktor Orban.
Maybe there's some geopolitics that went into it.
And the church was like, oh, we didn't realize the Hungarian government sucked.
Yep.
All right, let's build one in Vienna. Anyway. Yeah, so make fun of Barcelona all you want. It is a big gap, though. If you look at the 200-mile thing in Europe, like a massive hole is right there in northeastern Spain, southern France.
But they have nice train access there, right?
They do, but even that, if you take the highest speed AVE train from Barcelona to Madrid, it's still like 2.5 hours nonstop. And then you're not even at temple sites in Madrid. You got to get off the train and take the metro and all that stuff. So they do have good trains.
All right, other ones, Scotland, more European, Scotland, Dublin. I think maybe that's a similar situation to the two that you just mentioned. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, if one goes in Scotland, don't expect one in Ireland immediately.
True.
But I could see Ireland's got like one stake, but it's its own island.
It's an island, yeah.
Yeah, it's less accessible.
There's one in Northern Ireland. They would probably, if the border's not closed yet, they could still go there.
There's no temple in Northern Ireland.
There's a stake, in Northern Ireland.
Oh, sorry. I was like, what are you talking
San Luis Obispo? Bakersfield.
I just threw that one up there randomly. I had nothing to back up San Luis Obispo other than saying, well, the Central California area is kind of far from LA. And Bakersfield actually is maybe a maybe. Do you like my thought for Reykjavik, though? I think
it would be unique.
Right? Sure would.
Can you imagine if they get up there and be like, here's a country where we've got 3 branches, everyone.
It's like open
which is
for
good.
a week
We actually
a
had we only had 2 branches 10 years ago. So now we have 3.
Oh.
And we say we're going to build one there.
This one might have to rely on tourists.
Yeah, absolutely.
In all reality, well, the nice thing is they could put it next to the Blue Lagoon. They could use the geothermal stuff for heating the font. It saves on costs.
Oh, yeah. I'd totally go check that out.
Literally, though, I think a temple in Reykjavik is about as likely as a temple in Riyadh. But
but it's an honorable mention nonetheless.
It's an honorable mention.
Jackson, Mississippi, Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah, why Jackson? What's that? Where's that idea from?
I don't know. I didn't put it on there.
I think that was you, Geoff.
No, I think you put it on the record.
I don't know.
Like many things, Jackson, Mississippi exists as a mystery, and no one knows why.
Brazil. Last conference, it was announced in Victoria, and that was a big surprise because I was not. There was other places I thought had more stakes, but I guess that's a good place too. So yeah. I guess the field's pretty wide open in Brazil.
I liked your comment with Christchurch, Geoff. Can we really be a Christ-centered church without a temple
That
in
was me.
Christchurch?
I didn't write
Oh,
that.
that was Cory.
That
Well
was my
done,
joke.
Cory. That's awesome. That's a great joke.
And it actually would make a lot of sense too, just for New Zealand, because it's the major city on the southern island.
Yeah,
so
I think so. I think that's a good guess.
We've seen a lot of play here in Green Bay or Madison, Wisconsin. Wisconsin does not have a temple. I believe people often think it has a temple, like in Madison maybe, or in Milwaukee, but it does not. And I think you could make a case for either one of those. I mean, Milwaukee is not that far from Chicago,
right?
Or even by train. And I think the Chicago Temple is on the northern side of Chicago, if I'm not mistaken, because that's the bougier part of Chicago.
Republic of the Congo, that's on that list.
Which we talked about.
Yeah, which we talked about. And Yuma.
Last, think about this one, folks.
I don't know.
I think there's a case to be made for Yuma. That's right. It's out in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing near it, that whole area. You could put a temple in like Yuma, and it could serve like Imperial County, California, and mostly just Yuma. There's not much else there, but the people out there live very far away from. They're assigned to the San Diego Temple. It is not close. Just last year, I drove that route. I drove through Yuma en route to San Diego and said, my goodness, it takes forever to get from Yuma to San Diego.
That's a great route.
You're driving across all of California.
Whatever, Geoff. Yeah.
Well, Cory with the attitude. What, you got a problem with Yuma?
I would say Mexicali on the other side of the border.
Yeah.
I think that's more deserving.
That's actually fair. I think that could be a decent pick right there.
Like
instead.
a Ciudad Juarez kind of a situation.
Let's do it one better and actually build it in Los Algodones, Mexico.
Ooh, nice.
The northernmost city of Mexico, which is on the border of California and Arizona. There's not much there.
I have been there many times because that's.
You've been to Algodones? It's a crack
all the time.
There's billboards all around it approaching the highway that goes down to it for like dentists and stuff like that. Just saying like cross the border, get some health care for less than you spend in the U.S.
My grandparents would be snowbirds in Yuma for years and years, my whole growing up. So we'd always go and spend a day eating street tacos in Algodones. That was what we would do.
Huh?
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, that's a fun note to end on, Joe. Thank you for that bit of
that little anecdote of my life.
I would just go to Del Taco. That was
yes, you would.
I grew up in, I still grew up outside of LA, but it's like, yes, I would like the flatbread taco, please. Thank you. And some cheesy, gooey nachos. Real Mexican food.
And a hamburger with fries.
I don't like their hamburgers. They're fine. So, everyone, what do you think about our predictions? Let us know. Sound off on this post. Sound off on the post with it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you like. You can send us an email, contact thisweekinmormons.com. And of course, please support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/thisweekinmormons, and pledge $3 a month so that you can be entertained for an hour and a half of three guys yelling at each other about where temples might show up every 6 months. It really would be fun if we had like a much more negative interaction, right? It'd be like, no, Joe, you're dumb. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. Why would you think that?
We could probably stand to spice it up, get some of the spirit of Al back into the repartee.
Just start calling each other morons and like just be dismissive of one another's comments. I've changed. I can't do that anymore.
Good times.
I'm too woke. Doesn't work that way. But thanks for listening, folks. This is good. So we'll have this, put up here. We've got some time to percolate on it, share it around. We'd love to know what you think about the temple predictions. It's always fun to guess this. Of course, it's just for fun. We're not trying to like be out of turn.
Calm down. Yeah.
Don't freak out. But it's just like, it's okay to think about because we guarantee church leadership takes some of the things we talked about into consideration.
Specifically, the things that we talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But so that's why the temple will be in Reykjavik. Yes. And when they ask President Nelson about it later on, it'll be like the one in, was it Russia or Shanghai when he said he got up that morning and felt impressed? Which one was
India,
that?
yeah.
That was India.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like we had to do this. He's going to get up and be like, I just felt like the Saints in Iceland needed a win, and this is to honor their contribution to Spanish Fork. Bit of church history there. You can look
into.
That's right.
Yeah. That is true. Forgot about that.
Into Brigham Young thinking all the Icelandic
people
were just. Brigham Young thought all the Icelandic people were just Danes and just said, yeah, just go down there. That's what happened. Well, this has been a good time. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Cory. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, too.
Yeah, like being here.
Have a good one.
Good to have you guys. Everyone have a great conference. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to our Temple Predictions. This has been This Week in Mormons. I'm Geoff. Those are the other guys, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.